Hello, everyone. Oh dear, is my audio way down? There it is. Why on earth was that so quiet? That is strange. Alright, we're good. How are we all? I'm reading a really interesting essay right now um, called Evolutionary Love by Charles Sanders Peirce. Entirely unrelated to what's going to follow this. There's a really interesting line here. Suppose, for example, I'll just read the whole thing. Uh, Everybody can see that the statement of St. John is the formula of an evolutionary philosophy which teaches that growth comes only from love, from, I will not say self-sacrifice, from the ardent impulse to fulfill another's highest impulse. Suppose, for example, that I have an idea that interests me. It is my creation, it is my creature, for as shown in last July's Motors, this is a previous paper he had published. It is a little person, I love it, and I will sink myself in perfecting it. It is not by dealing out cold justice to the circle of my ideas that I can make them grow, but by cherishing and tending them as I would the flowers in my garden. The philosophy we draw from John's Gospel is that this is the way the mind develops, and as for the cosmos, only so far as it yet is mind, and so has life, is it capable of further evolution. I don't know. This is really interesting. That is not going to be the attitude taken towards any of the following by the people we're going to cover. Suppose, for argument's sake, that there was some definitive debate going to take place in which the future sexual ethic of your society was going to be decided once and for all. And one side, robo audio. Sound is a bit weird, huh? Is it still weird? Hang on, let me take a look at this. What's going on here? The audio should not be robotic. It says the connection's excellent. Odd. Hang on, one moment. How are we now? Two sources. That doesn't make any sense. One moment. It's not coming from this. Very strange. Okay, I fixed it. I see what happened. So, for whatever reason, OBS activated my webcam microphone as opposed to my really expensive $300 studio microphone. It was an echo. Alright, we'll cut that out. Starting again. Suppose that there was some definitive debate going to take place in which the sexual ethic of your culture was going to be decided once and for all. And on one side, you had a party that wanted to radically restrict your right to make decisions as to the kinds of activities you're allowed to engage in and with whom, etc., etc. What kinds of protections you could use, both pre and after the fact, if something were to occur as a result, things of that sort. Who would you want to stake the position for your freedom in that domain on? Who would you want to be debating your side? Would it be, by chance, somebody who had the brilliance and social wherewithal to label themselves Mr. Girl? We're not just going to look at this, but dear God, just dear God, why? What in the world is this? You will see what in the world is this title. I have pre-watched a few seconds of this debate, and it's like, Mr. Girl is a perfectly normal name. Mr. Girl is a perfectly normal name if you take away a huge ton of cultural baggage that signals something very, very, very specific to a certain audience. I don't think Mr. Girl is a pedophile. I think Mr. Girl has said some very unwise things that gave a very bad impression of him because he thought he was being funny. He was not. That being said, do I think he isn't positively? I don't know. I don't know him at all. All I know is he got kicked off of Vosh because he was asking the colors of the underdress of hypothetical underage girls in a very, very creepy hypothetical about what they thought the preferred age of female partners was for the average man historically. It was very, very strange. Is she trans? Mr. Girl is not trans, as far as I can ascertain. I got a bad feeling about this too. This is... No, this is James. Slightly better. Let's get into it. This is a debate on is sexual liberation good? Mr. Girl versus Daniel Hakikatju. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Let's go.
Debating whether or not sexual liberation is good, and we are starting right now with Daniel Hakikachu's opening statement. Thanks so much for being with us. Daniel, the floor is all yours for your opening statement.
Okay, my pleasure. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah. I want to give two main arguments for why we should all reject sexual liberation. First, the totalitarianism argument. We all want an ordered society.
So... sexual liberty. Sure, maybe, but have you considered totalitarianism? You'd think if he made the totalitarian argument, like the associations with that term, it would be something along the lines of like, well, no, by some strange convoluted string of logic, we find ourselves in an effectively totalitarian situation by certain attitudes towards sexual promiscuity or something like that. Something like that. But no, this is apparently where we want to end up. It's not a deterrent. This isn't 1984. This is, well, I mean, look, freedom's great and all, but have you considered being a slave to Big Brother?
Order means cooperation and non-aggression. It means that people work together to produce food, maintain shelter, defend against outside attacks. It means people don't harm each other, destroy each other's property, steal or molest. Without order, life is just nasty, brutish, and short. So how do you prevent this chaos and maintain order? There are two approaches, top-down versus bottom-up. We all know the top-down approach. There's a centralized government that enforces laws that prevent us from harming each other and requires us to cooperate. The government uses technologies to enforce laws and maintain social order. Historically, most of human civilization has not had this top-down system, mainly because centralization, surveillance, and enforcement require technology. If someone decides to attack you, you use technology like your phone to call the police. The police use cars to get to you as quickly as possible, and firearms to apply deadly force efficiently. Technology is essential to maintain order. Without these technologies, anyone can assault you or destroy your property, and by the time authorities find out, you're dead. So how did societies maintain order prior to these technologies? For most human history, order was not top-down, but rather bottom-up. This social order through organic, biologically rooted relationships of marriage, family, community, and religion. When you're married to someone in a reciprocal relationship of commitment and care, you're less inclined to harm him or her. When you're in the same family and share kinship ties with mother, father, children, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., you're less inclined to harm them. You're more inclined to care for them, cooperate with them, provide for them, even self-sacrifice for them. You have this natural
Aren't I'm conjecturing here. I don't know the stats in this, but I remember hearing something to the effect that most murders were domestic. Am I wrong on that?
Altruism and non-aggression to members of your larger kinship group in your community. Also, religion increases altruism. These things are all biologically based. These natural mechanisms we all have foster ordered human society.
Where is it getting the idea that religion is biologically based? That's very strange.
Not all animals have these mechanisms, which is why many societies do not live together many species do not live together in groups. But humans can live in large ordered groups because of these natural instincts that maintain the fundamental relationships that generate social order from the bottom up.
I like how he read Rousseau and Hobbes and just said, yeah, they're both true.
The problem with sexual liberation is it destroys these organic relationships. This is self-evident, especially given how the biggest advocates of sexual liberation historically, people like Shillamuth Firestone, Andrea Dworkin, Masha Gessen, have explicitly stated that their goal is to destroy marriage and family. But if there is any doubt about how sexual liberation is so corrosive to marriage and family, we can go deeper into the evidence in the open discussion. But the point is, when these relationships are gone, the natural tendencies that we have to be altruistic, to cooperate, to not harm others, all these biologically rooted tendencies are greatly diminished, if not completely lost. As a result, social order collapses. And the only way to have order is by imposing an increasingly totalitarian top-down system. This is what we have today. Without robust organic bonds, the
What?
only way to prevent society from exploding is to track everyone, monitor everyone's media consumption, censor people to prevent violence, closely regulate.
You think surveillance society is based on a desperate need to control people's sexuality? Okay.
What is taught in schools, surveil everyone's finances, restrict access to weapons, even impose a social credit system. Here's a concrete example. Naturally, fathers have a strong bond with their children, a natural instinct to love, protect, and provide. Part of this affection is tied to the father's knowledge that his children are really his. If he's not certain that his children are biologically his because the mother has been cheating on him, then that affects his natural feelings for those children and his willingness to provide for them.
Screw you adopted children, I guess.
This is found even in the animal kingdom when paternity is obscured due to promiscuous female behavior or even the possibility of promiscuous female behavior. This kills fatherly investment. But traditional cultures and religions prevent this by banning promiscuity. And the bonds of marriage and extended family pressure ensure that fathers provide for their kids. But today, sexual liberation destroys these organic mechanisms, directly harming children. Without these mechanisms, the top-down state must intervene.
If they're organic mechanisms, then why are they undermined by liberation? That doesn't seem to follow, does it? If they're organic, it seems the logic would be that people naturally sort of fall into those behaviors in the absence of social convention. But now he's arguing that you require social convention to crystallize them. These are contradictory positions.
Intervene by forcing fathers to provide child support. It does this by tracking fathers, forcefully taking funds from their bank accounts, throwing them in jail if they miss payments. This level of totalitarian control was not necessary in the past because organic relationships created the internal psychological and the external sociological conditions to all but guarantee paternal investment. Another example, single motherhood has shot up since the sexual revolution.
Okay, so the argument is actually quite specifically just by this immensely convoluted chain of logic, sexual liberation, specifically of women, forces the state to engage in the totalitarian management of women's sexual decisions. We need to go back to a situation where people are just acculturated to do this themselves, I suppose. As if that's in itself organic. Again, like he's talking about the use of social conventions to control people's behavior. to control people's behavior that is organic. But what does organic mean if it has to be imposed artificially? It doesn't...
Who is providing for millions of children living in these single mom households when mothers can't? In bottom-up societies without sexual liberation, it's the father, extended families, the larger kinship group. In liberated societies like the US and Europe, it's the welfare state. 90% of welfare in the US is given to single mothers. Where does the money for these programs come from?
I love Mr. Girl's expression. I'm very sympathetic to that right now.
It comes from you and me as taxpayers. The government must create this massive bureaucratic system to surveil all our finances and then forcefully tax us in order to subsidize sexual liberty. This is how sexual liberty and totalitarianism are deeply linked. Another example.
The volume is low. Here, let me fix that. Let's bring that up a bit. The volume's actually quite high. I'm just going to put a filter in to boost it a little bit. Let me know how that is, if that's any better.
So much of our mental health depends on traditional marriage and extended families. This is how God created us. But even if you don't believe in creationism or God and instead believe we are a product of evolution, you must also believe that our psychologies were formed in the context of thousands of years of traditional marriage and family.
No, as soon as we have like cultural traditions, we're in an artificial social form, right? Like we're crafting our environment and reproducing ideas via stories and later writing and things like that. Our natural inclinations, such as they are, if indeed they are, to whatever extent, were formed in the bloody jungle. They don't apply in a completely different environment.
If you suddenly pluck humans out of that context and throw them in a world of unprecedented sexual liberation, you would also expect unprecedented mental dysfunction. And that's exactly what we see. According to evolution, we didn't evolve the psychologies needed to live well-adjusted lives as sexually unrestricted, polyamorous, porn-addicted libertines. Who's going to ensure that this society of mentally dysfunctional people doesn't rip itself to shreds? You need a muscular, totalitarian surveillance state just to prevent mass upheaval. So this is the totalitarianism argument. The second argument is the chicken argument.
Okay, so we've heard the bottom supremacist argument by somebody who has some very strange sexual tension with the state. There's something inherently comic about a Muslim upholding the American nuclear family as the ideal. Not intrinsically. Single mothers do work extremely hard. Alright, keep going.
Imagine a man who goes to the grocery store, buys a whole chicken, takes it home, has sex with it, cooks it, and eats it. Is this morally permissible? When Western college-educated people are asked this, they say they think it's weird, but it isn't immoral. But when you ask non-Westerners this, regardless of culture or religion, they find this highly immoral. Why the difference? Psychologists like Jonathan Haidt explained that we have different moral modules within the mind. One module is the care/harm module.
No, there's different bloody content with respect to what moral means in either context, right? Like I'll be more inclined to say something is immoral in a strong sense if I'm elevating my sense of disgust by attaching it to some notion that my attitude is in some way molded by adherence to the dictates of a deity or something like that. I'll be more comfortable making that kind of leap. Whereas if I think morality is something sort of culturally contingent and philosophically arrived at, if it has no effect on society in a general sense. Like, for example, you might say if you've, like, violated the chicken in this case, and then broadcast that fact, that there would be something immoral about that because doing so would be deeply disturbing to the people around you. You probably have a case there, at least on some level. But I mean, they're not talking about the same thing is why they have a different opinion. Um, that's all. And Jonathan Haidt is an idiot.
This module makes us feel that harming others is wrong. Another module is the purity disgust module. This one makes us feel that things like smearing feces on someone or sex with a chicken is wrong. What Haidt and others argue is that Westerners, due to their culture and education, have a muted purity disgust module.
I mean, there are secular vegans who make basically the same equivocation, right? Or not the same equivocation, the same argument. They will characterize people who eat meat as people who are effectively engaging in some form of bestiality. You know, because you're getting like organic enjoyment out of physical engagement with another organism. It's not really how sex works, so it falls apart, but these are not people who are specifically religious, right?
This means that the care/harm module dominates their moral evaluations. This is why in the chicken example, Westerners feel icky about it, but they don't feel there's a moral objection because technically no one is harmed. As long as no one is harmed, there's no moral problem. This moral sense is codified by John Stuart Mill's harm principle, which has heavily influenced Western law and moral philosophy. All is permitted as long as you don't harm others. But for most humans, morality is more than just a calculation of harm. Disgust is also a big part of determining right and wrong. Sure, there's cultural diversity about disgust, but there are also universals. Humans universally find certain sexual behaviors viscerally disgusting.
Then why do you even have the example of one person having sex with a chicken? That person clearly is not disgusted. So it's not universal. I don't like it either, but that's not... I'm just going to boost the audio a little bit on the video because apparently some people are finding it quiet. That's definitionally not a universal.
Humans also universally value innocence, purity, and sexual virtue. So I want to ask Mr. Girl and other fans of sexual liberation, do you believe that disgust and purity are morally valid? If not, then you should accept the full consequences of your stance. You should accept things like incest. If people are wearing condoms, there's no moral problem with parents, children, siblings all having sex, necrophilia, bestiality, the whole 9 yards. If you say disgust is not valid, you also have to admit that there's no problem with cannibalism, like eating dead relatives, with eating aborted fetuses, or how about pornography on every billboard showing porn?
Well, no, the issue there would be a combination of exploitative relationships. Like there's different levels of complexity there. It's not just disgust. Like you don't overcome the inherent problems with things like incest with immediate family members, or even like relatively like close, like cousins and whatnot. You don't overcome that just by saying, well, they weren't disgusted by it. There are other things going on there. Centering disgust here is completely irrelevant, especially since it's entirely attitudinal and can be cultivated by a society, as he just points out, by making the Western, non-Western divide in terms of how people respond to these things. These aren't universal. Would this guy die if he went into a BDSM store? He'd probably collapse on the ground and throw up.
Born to preschoolers. Ultimately, you have to believe that a sexually liberated society with all these things is as good as a society without them. If you want sexual liberation, you have to be committed to going all the way.
Why? Why would you need to be committed to going to whatever extreme this weirdo can imagine?
And if that weren't bad enough by itself, to make matters worse, none of us really knows what going all the way even means. Sexual liberation is like a dark, terrifying abyss. Once you jump in, you don't know where you'll end up, and there's no
chaos.
Stopping the fall. Fans of sexual liberation might not be fazed by the perversions rampant today, but we ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I'm a Muslim. I maintain that sexual liberation is bad for religious reasons. I believe there's great wisdom in God prohibiting destructive sexual behaviors, and Islam is the best religion in terms of facilitating healthy sexuality. But the totalitarianism and chicken arguments are not religious. They're arguments that appeal to our common humanity. I'm looking forward to hearing Max's response.
They're arguments that appeal to our common humanity, which gives us organic tendencies that have to be culturally and socially enforced by non-natural organizations. And they're universal despite the fact that people have fundamental disagreements about them based on geography and different impulses towards them. Okay.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening statement from Daniel. And want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral channel hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome.
I mean, you're a greedy bastard who doesn't care about the fallout from the people you platform, but whatever.
No matter what walk of life you are from. And with that, thanks so much, Mr. Girl. Thrilled to have you as... That's right. Mr. Girl has deferred on his opening statement, saying that he prefers to have more open discussion, so we're jumping right into that open discussion.
Oh, come on.
And thanks so much, gentlemen. The floor is all yours.
Really? You're gonna give him like an extended speech and you're just gonna do your awkward silence routine?
Okay, yeah, I have a couple of responses to some parts of that. One, I feel like you're framing it with a false dichotomy in that pointing out problems with modern Western society, like divorce or child, custody battles or child support payments. I don't think that is necessarily an argument in favor or against sexual liberation. I think those are problems too, and so I assume other like liberal leaning people can imagine a society where you have sexual liberation and you can solve those problems, that you don't need like fundamentalist religion to solve those problems. Another point I wanted to address was the disgust thing.
Okay.
I think disgust can be a consideration without being labeled as moral. So there are things that we don't want our neighbors to do because they're too disgusting. Even if we don't think we don't have to say they're immoral to say like, hey, don't do that. I think that was it.
That was it?
Oh yeah. I guess also just the idea that getting hounded for child support by a court is more totalitarian than what happens in majority Muslim countries or under Sharia law. If you break the rules, I don't agree with that either. I think I agree. There's like I get what you're saying, that there's more of a need for tracking people because they're not already organized into families and marriages on their own. But I don't think they really are organized on their own. I still think that the iron fist of totalitarianism is a lot of what is keeping those marriages and families together.
What?
You got it. And we'll jump into open discussion more formally. Also want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. So if you'd like to hear more from either Daniel or Mr. Girl, you certainly can by clicking on their links below, as well as if you...
He didn't prepare. He's got nothing. He didn't prepare. He is actually nothing. Oh, this is going to be a massacre.
If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button as we have many more juicy debates coming up. And thanks so much, gentlemen. The floor is all yours for open dialogue.
So thanks, Max, for the response and for listening to all of the 10 minutes.
For a second, I thought it was going to be an awkward, like, so, how are you doing?
No, it's kind of long, but I had a few questions. I wanted to address your points that you brought up in your response, but I thought it'd be good if you can define sexual liberation and like what exactly do you understand that to mean?
Okay. So I've read several of your articles, and I've seen your debate with Destiny, and a couple your video about pornography, and I think one another of your videos. So my under so my understanding is that
We're gonna watch one of those afterwards. It's gonna be insane.
under Sharia law, and you believe this, if two men are caught having sex, they can be executed. So that, to me, that is the like probably the epitome of not sexual liberation. So I guess sexual liberation for me is consenting adults can do whatever they want and think about or fantasize about whatever they want.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. Sexual liberation doesn't refer to a state. Sexual liberation refers to a process. Um, like there's typically like reference to like the sexual liberation, like the '60s and whatnot, where there was sort of a cultural loosening of the rules around these sorts of things, aided in addition by widespread access to contraception, things like that, so that the consequences weren't as immediate and dire and burdensome. Um, like sexual liberation could have been extremely like modest. It just requires a loosening up. It's not simply the fact of being legally allowed to have sex with a certain party. Um, it, he hadn't he didn't prepare anything. He didn't prepare at all. Like the reason why it matters as a process, as an actual like cultural shift, is because Daniel is making specifically political arguments. Um, that distinction, that there's a before and an after of a process, is what's supplying him with the terms of his argument. Mr. Grill is not going to be able to engage with that just at all.
Uh, and the government does not force you to have sex or provide sex. I don't know if this is a thing. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that there is some wifely duty to provide sex for her husband under Sharia law. Um, it's hard to describe what sexual liberation is. It's easier to describe what it isn't. Um,
My understanding is, and I could be very wrong on this, it's been a long time, but my understanding of it is that it's not that there is a, ubiquitously at least, it's not that there's a rule that uh, wives have to have sex with their husbands. It's that refusing to do so somehow annuls the marriage or something, or like it creates grounds for divorce on the husband's end. That's sort of my understanding of it. Somebody can
Yeah,
correct
so
me.
I mean,
I think
the
that's
thing
my
is
working
that
definition now.
so
It's
the
it's
thing,
it's going to differ widely depending on who and where you're talking about is the thing. Um, like Sharia is like it translates. It's often called Sharia law, but that's sort of um that's a little bit misleading. It means something more like the correct way or something. Like, this is the way. Um, it would almost be in some instances a synonym with law, and other times it would be more like like social mores as opposed to law. It's complicated.
thing is that like in the opening, that if you have this kind of rule that as long as it's consenting adults doing what they want,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to lead to a lot of dysfunction. It's going to lead to psychological dysfunction, I claim, and there's a lot of research that will justify this. It will also lead to sociological problems like the collapse of marriage, this massive increase in single parent households, massive decrease in or increase in divorce, which can be very traumatic for children, obviously. You have just a more individualistic, atomized society, and then that has to be addressed through more top-down measures, totalitarian control, where we live in essentially in a surveillance state because people don't have the same kind of organic kindness, willingness to cooperate, willingness to avoid harming others, because they're not related to each other through like clear biological lineage and larger families. And so the totalitarianism is the result of what you described, consenting adults doing whatever they want. But so this is a reason why we wouldn't want to have this kind of.
I like how the definition of totalitarianism is the government putting any sort of impingement on men, but he is specifically asking, when he asks for a reversal of sexual liberation, for culture and presumably the state as well, to aid in the constraining of women specifically. But when it's applied to men, totalitarianism is just whenever the government does stuff.
Sexual liberation.
So you're saying some sort of top-down control is inevitable. So why not just use that top-down control to keep people in marriages and families rather than to? Well,
so
do you concede that, in your view, that the society should push people or force people into heterosexual marriages, essentially? Like there's not really another option.
I think that heterosexuality, pair bonding, these are natural things. Like they emerge even without like a
Heterosexuality is not synonymous with pair bonding.
Governmental force. And we should distinguish also between pre-modern governments versus modern.
Pair bonding isn't even inherently sexual. That's wrong.
The modern nation state, and especially the modern surveillance police state, because technology has allowed a level of control over people's lives that has never existed in the past. So yeah, in Islam, in Sharia, which I believe in and I promote, there are these kinds of governmental measures, right?
Yes.
Like
so that's what I'm talking about. Do you concede that is also totalitarian?
No, because it's something like you can have a system, like you can have a government that's not totalitarian. The government imposes, like every government will impose certain kinds of restrictions, whether we're talking about, Protestant kings or the Catholic Church or Chinese, Han Dynasty. Like there are always going to be some kind of government imposition. That's not necessarily totalitarian.
But if you have premarital sex, or if you have gay sex, or do these things that you are labeling as sexual liberation that destroy families and marriages, if you do, you're not allowed to do those things under Sharia law.
Yes, but I'm inviting you to think about. I'm inviting you and the audience to consider those restrictions on certain sexual behaviors and promiscuity as benefiting overall society, because it maintains marriages and so forth.
I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to get you to concede that you're saying we won't need this top-down surveillance state, because if you just use a top-down, more authoritarian approach earlier in the process before the marriage falls apart, then you can just kind of hold it together that way. But either way,
it's not top down. Like it's bottom up, because this is something that's biological. Heterosexuality is biological.
Well, you can still force someone to do something.
Well, then hang on. Then sexual liberation wasn't a liberation, right? Because when you liberate something, you free it from impediments. That's what that means. Like it's the lifting of restrictions on things. It's not simply a shift in sexual mores, it was also attended by changes in laws.
Something that is biological, like you could force someone to eat.
Yeah, you can incentivize it. You can
force some. You can put a machete to someone's neck and make them eat a sandwich, even if they're hungry. You're still forcing them to do it.
Again, humans naturally do this. You don't need a government. Like parents.
Well, then why do you need Sharia law to tell people not to have premarital sex if they're naturally going to do that? Or
okay, that's good. Okay, we're bringing it back.
Or tell women not to leave their husbands if they're like you're you're still telling people to do
Yes.
something in either
Yes.
case. And so I'm willing to concede to you that yeah, families break apart. We don't know whose kids are whose. Then we start to have to implement more surveillance measures, freezing bank accounts, all the stuff you said. That's true. But your proposed alternative also involves telling people what to do.
So I'm trying
I mean,
to.
you're literally arguing about sexual liberation. The opposite of liberation is authoritarianism, or being told what to do, rules and laws.
So do you recognize that there's a difference between, like, humans do have a certain kind of normative or moral attitudes and instincts that they just have naturally. It's not something that an outside force has to impose. And the proof of this is when we look throughout world cultures, there are certain patterns and there are certain universality across cultures that.
Which include artifices like language, right? Like that's not an argument. We are not in a state of nature. Nowhere. You're talking literally about cultures. You're talking about like these huge concatenations of technologies and practices that are born of millennia of artificially crafting the world in which we live. We are not talking about like the something that is handed down to us by biological evolution.
It can't be socially constructed, because how did all these independent cultures arrive at the same practices?
They didn't. You have polygamists. You have cultures that are completely fine with same-sex relations. You have ones that are radically not. You have cultures that are fine with multiple wives. You have cultures that are fine with multiple husbands. This is factually incorrect. They don't all arrive at the same place.
Like, for example, valuing innocence, valuing purity, looking down and having this kind of negative attitude towards promiscuity, cheating in a marriage, or even the institution of marriage itself, which requires certain sexual exclusivity. Why do we see this throughout cultures? It's because there's a biological component. These things are.
No, we don't. In fact, one of the ways in which, in the formation of the passport system, Indian workers were kept out of Canada is through restriction of was through marriage laws, where they wouldn't recognize spouses of Indian men who had multiple wives as being their partners.
Universal, right?
It could be, but the question I'm asking you is:
This is
will
recent.
you concede that Sharia law uses authoritarianism to hold family units and marriages together? And it sounds like you're saying no, you won't concede that. Okay, so
No, I
I guess so we can move on from that point
because it's biological. Like I want you to also acknowledge, like,
you can force someone to do something that they're biologically inclined to do. You can force a hungry person to eat at gunpoint. It doesn't mean you're not forcing them.
Let me just think about it. You can force a hungry person to eat. But you don't have to put a gun to the person's head. He will eat.
But
well, not if it's something he doesn't want to eat, right? Like that's like maybe a person, for example, has a certain proclivity towards monogamy. You can force them into a monogamous relationship they don't want to be in, despite it satisfying that condition. So, Mr. Girl's correct here.
You can.
I don't think you'd call that forcing it.
You wouldn't? You're saying
Oh.
So if I'm walking down the street and I see a hot guy and I think, oh, I would like to have sex with that man. Then he pulls out a gun and says, "Bend over." Am I not being raped?
No, that's
Even
a thought versus an action. You're the example you gave
I was
earlier
already
a person is
planning.
eating.
I was
a person
I was
is
already
eating
going.
food.
No, I was already going to have sex with him. I already planned to have sex with him. So I'm walking over to him to say, "Hey, do you want to have sex?" And then just as I get there, he pulls out a gun and says, "Pull down your pants." Even if I want to do it, I'm doing it. I'm still being coerced.
I think that let's say I concede that, I still think that there's
Okay.
less force involved. There's less
that's
force by Islam on people as opposed to the modern nation state in order to keep people. So I can concede this point that you're making about.
Okay, so and you're basically saying it's easier to nip it in the bud and just keep the family unit together rather than deal with the fallout of all the complicated, messy stuff that happens if you don't.
How is there less force involved? He's arguing against sexual liberation. That's his argument. Like people aren't forced to do as much. That's what he's complaining about.
Yeah, that has happened. Yeah, basically what has happened in
Okay.
history.
Do you believe in the concept of a fake happy marriage? Like, do you think it's possible? So I understand that you don't think this is what is happening, but I think to your average, Westerner who believes in sexual liberation, we view those marriages held together by uh, authority and coercion as fundamentally unhappy, even if the people in the marriage report being happy. We think that if a woman can't leave whenever she wants, that definitionally that means it can't be a happy marriage because there's no way to know if she actually wants to be there.
So I think that.
Well, I don't think it definitionally means she doesn't want to be there. What it definitionally means though is that if she doesn't want to be there, if she doesn't want to be there, then it doesn't matter, which would devalue the fact that she is there. Because now it's no longer you're present because you value the community in which you're a part. You're present because you have to be. And not you have to be because of some internal motivation where you actually you're invested in something common, but because something extrinsic is keeping you there by force.
People's individual experience of happiness is an important consideration in figuring out what moral rules to follow. But there are other major considerations as well, such as maintaining these kinds of biologically rooted institutions of marriage and family, where sometimes.
If these were biologically rooted institutions, they wouldn't vary across cultures. Period. And they do. His argument is that they don't. But they do.
You have rules that might limit personal choice or personal pursuit of individual desire or individual happiness in order to further these kinds of broader goals, which are, again, they're biologically rooted, and they ultimately lead to, if you want to make it a purely utilitarian argument. Or
actually, I'm going to walk that back. It might be the case that they would differ across cultures, because we're not talking about a state of nature. We're talking about people being acculturated into different norms and mores and all that sort of thing. We actually just don't have access to what our natural proclivities would be because we don't have feral societies to judge that are identical to every community that exists. We don't have a twin Earth to compare here. I get the impression a lot of people view Mr. Girl as smart because of his mannerisms, his slow speech pattern, the way he looks up to the right, communicating deep thoughts, Sargon 2.0. I think he thinks that makes him look smart. I think there are definitely people who think that makes him look smart, or who think he looks smart as a result of that. God, I'm so tired. I'm sorry. I'm slurring my words here. I don't think he's stupid. I don't think he knows very much. And I don't think this weird attitude of just kind of placidly and slowly feeling things out in real time. I don't think that act is an excuse for not doing any preparation. And this seems like he did no preparation.
Consequentialist argument, you say ultimately it leads to more people who are happy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you will concede that without sexual liberation, women are individually possibly unhappier in their marriages, but that even the women in the society will be happier overall because the society will be better.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, look at this scenario. I can imagine a world where technology has advanced to such a degree that they can give you drugs where you like are constantly experiencing an orgasm,
Mhm.
and compare the happiness level of people in that society, whereas as opposed to today's society, or a society that is traditional, or pre-modern religious society. I think those societies are preferable and better than the constant orgasm society where people are as the happiest that they can possibly be. Would you agree with that?
Um, I agree that a society where people are constantly having an orgasm is worse.
Hang on. Is Kinks of Seplo says to risk the wrath will make a TLDR the chicken if it was able to give consent to the act on its corpse afterwards because that was its. What are you talking about? No, I'm arguing that people eat meat because it is pleasurable. This pleasure is indistinguishable after the initial purchase. The harm was caused by the purchase, not the harmless events that happened after. If you're trying to argue that, in fact, having sex with the corpse of a chicken is identical to eating it, flip that around and ask if having sex with someone is identical to eating them. It's not. They're distinct. I mean, the phrasing there is bad, but you get my point. What Mr. Girl needed to say was that while sexual liberation opens up some side effects, our takeaway should be that however bad those side effects may be, the previous status quo was worse. Yes. Oh, you're arguing against the relative morality of eating meat versus bestiality. Got it. Okay, so you're not equivocating the two. People do that rhetorically, and it's stupid.
Orgasm, or like just bliss, like just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
maximum level of bliss that you can experience.
No more talk of
as an
chickens in the
individual.
Yeah,
chat. Chickens are a
I
banned
wouldn't
topic
want
now.
that the Matrix society. Yeah, I wouldn't want that either.
Okay, so then it's just a matter of how far you're going to go, and what things do you want to preserve that the
Well,
bliss society doesn't have.
but I don't think God is real. I think this is um part of the disconnect here is that you believe God is good and you believe God is the red pill. But
God,
right, and I think God is the blue pill. So
so
I
but tell
think
me,
I
why
th-
why don't you want the matrix society actually? Like what was the problem with it?
because it's not real, and because there's no struggle, there's nothing to do. Um,
Read Bojiro. The Matrix Society is real in any sense that these two would be talking about it, but whatever. We're going with the Wachowski sisters version.
But
I
it's
find
maximum
meaning
happiness. Like, why do you need to do something? It's like you
happy
can do stuff.
happiness.
You can do stuff, but you're just in a constant state of euphoria. Like you can live however you want, but it's just a constant state of euphoria. You won't be necessarily motivated
But
to
it's the same reason I'm not
interact with people.
religious. The same reason I'm not religious, because I don't
What do you
believe
mean
in
by
it.
that?
I don't
No,
believe in it. I don't think
yeah, it's a
I don't
thought
think it's
experiment. It's a thought experiment to see,
well,
like,
I know, but it would
to
be the thought
understand.
the experiment would be, do I want to have bliss that is not connected to anything outside of my own delusion?
So you're acknowledging like there's an inherent value to
Yes.
reality.
Yes.
That is like it's not religious, but that is a metaphysical claim, right? That to say that reality has some value. Well, what is
No,
that value?
I'm not even saying it has a objective value. I'm saying I value it. And that's what same reason I don't
Why?
drink or do drugs.
Why?
I don't drink or do any drugs for this reason, because I don't want to feel feelings that are completely unconnected to essentially other people, or
But you see the analogy here, right? Like I also
yeah.
am saying in
Men
my
that don't
argument that
drink best have
marriage
his
also
reasons.
has a value, and it's a value that transcends an individual's happiness or bliss.
Yes, I
So do you see the
understand.
analogy?
Yes, I do see the analogy. But
It's
do you
not, I didn't
see?
bring God into it, right? A non-religious person could make the same argument.
Um, yes, but do you see my counter analogy in that a marriage that looks happy and feels happy, if it's held together by the woman being unable to leave, might not be real to me. If I'm looking at
This is a
if
good
I'm
line of
looking at Shaylin,
argumentation.
my
This is actually
girlfriend,
really good.
we're looking in each other's eyes, and if I know in the back of my mind, you can't afford to leave, you won't have the support of the community if you leave, you could be punished physically if you leave and shunned forever and never have another shot. You might not be able to get a job in our society. Um, all those
I,
things to me undermine the reality of the relationship. It makes it feel like it's not real. I don't know if you love me or if you're scared of them. I don't know if
so
you're having sex with me because you want to or because you have to.
no, like, so I think that you're trying to characterize like Islamic law. So there are a lot of details. It's not the case that a woman who is really not happy in her marriage, like she has no recourse. That's not true. She can leave, like under certain
Under
circumstances.
okay,
Under
okay,
certain
but what if I'm not
circumstances.
in those certain circumstances? What if she's just not attracted to me anymore? Can she leave?
Again, there are circumstances she can offer,
I need you to
uh,
answer this. Can she
yes, she
leave
can leave. Yes, she
if
can.
she
She can
Oh,
offer the dowry
oh,
or the
what
mahar.
and if I say no?
Say
Does she have a
no, then
does she have a unilateral ability to just leave if she doesn't want to be with me anymore?
I'm of the position that that's not allowed in Sharia. Some have
I,
disagreed with me.
okay, so I just want to go with your position because I don't know
he's
anything
getting
about it.
nervous.
So
Mhm.
I'm assuming I've heard you say
As
before
well, he
that you
should.
can't just leave because you feel like it, right? So
Mhm.
if I'm with my, let's say Shaylin and I get married, she's my wife. I'm looking in her eyes. It could be that she doesn't want to be with me. She just doesn't feel like it anymore. And in your view, she can't leave. Also, I'm
Like
making this up.
girlfriend,
No.
if you're married. Okay.
Let's say we're married. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Also, is she obligated to provide sex for me?
Um, yeah, she's obligated, and you're also obligated as her husband to provide shelter and food, like
Sure,
regardless
sure.
of whether you want to or
I
not. So
I
there are just
understand.
duties. Well, I just
A
want to make sure
wifely
the
duty.
audience understands like what
Okay.
we're talking.
You notice the categorical absence of sources. Now, Daniel contends correctly that there are variations of Sharia, or at least by implication, he implies there are variations of Sharia in which the woman can, by sheer choice against the husband's will, simply exit the relationship. That divorce is basically effectively at will. I don't think. I think this is being overstated somewhat, but okay, he acknowledges that there's something in that direction as a viable alternative. He does not actually provide an argument for why, because he doesn't say I don't think those versions of Sharia are valid. He says my interpretation of Sharia is that it's not, or what does he actually say? He says my version of Sharia or something. He doesn't provide a source commending that particular version of Sharia. He's not even giving an explanation of where he's deriving Sharia from, because it's not always derived from the same place, and it's not always from the same interpretive through the same interpretive mediums. It's not always referring to the same people. And indeed, as Belisara puts it here, aptly, marriage as he defines it isn't universal worldwide, though. So, like, where's this coming from outside of Daniel's preference?
Talking
If
about, right?
she does not provide sex for me, am I at some point after chastising her for this, am I allowed to hit her for that?
Um,
This is not a hard question, dude.
are you allowed to hit her if she refuses?
To have sex
So
with me?
like you can, after a certain point,
What?
Yes.
you can't force her. You can't like grab her and attack her
But
and
I can slap her.
no, you can't.
What can I do?
That took a
Yeah, you
long time.
can you
How
can
am I
like
allowed to hit her?
you can for example spank her.
Okay, I can live
What?
with that.
Mhm.
All right.
I mean,
So
have you watched American films where you see all kinds of depictions of spanking of women who act in a
I've,
certain
I have seen. I don't know if we're
revolting
What?
talking
way?
about the same films, but I have seen some
No,
depictions of
not
spanking of
no. I'm
women.
talking
Yeah.
about classic Hollywood. I'm talking about look at what John Wayne does in some of his movies,
Yes. It's like
or
that. I
you know.
understand. Okay,
So this
so
is depicted in Hollywood.
okay, so to tie together my reverse analogy,
Mhm.
this
Don't
sounds like a
assent to
paradise
that,
for men.
Mr. Girl. What the hell?
I can marry a woman, or a girl. I can marry if she has hit puberty. I can marry an 11-year-old. I can finally marry one of the cuties.
Oh
Uh,
my god.
she is obligated to provide sex for me. I can hit her or spank her if she does not. She can't leave because she feels like it. She has to provide a argument to some authority if she wants to leave. And you're saying you're not bringing God into it, but the laws that we're following are all said to have been written by a prophet or come from God.
Mhm.
So to me, that's the blue pill. That's the paradise. That's the happiness. I can do whatever I want. I can have sex whenever I want, and I assume if I want to leave her that I can, right?
No, how is this like a paradise? Like you have
It's a paradise for
to
men.
get married. No, to get married, you are obligated to provide a dowry. You have to get approval of a family,
Yeah.
her
Those are
family to get married. You
I
have
understand
to.
those are the
No, you have
downside.
to.
I'm
Yeah,
I
these
I
are. Well, you're not mentioning these. So you talked for a while. Let me respond to this kind of caricature that you've painted for your audience. Like all of these things that you find within Islam and Muslim societies. First of all, they're universal, by the way. Like
okay,
these are
but you can we
universal
do
values.
before
No, no,
before you
don't
start
interrupt. Don't interrupt.
before you start, will you acknowledge that everything I said would be allowed?
Um, yes,
And
I think I
my last question,
will
can I leave her whenever I want? Is that true? Because I said that, but I don't know if it's true.
leave her whenever you want.
If I don't,
Yes, you
if I'm
can
not,
divorce. You
I can,
can
I can, I can
divorce.
just, I have unilateral right to just say I'm done with you with the blonde one. I'm done with the blonde one from Cuties. I'm done with you. I'm moving on.
Yeah, but you have a responsibility
You're too
towards the
old.
children.
Okay, sure.
You'd have
I just
custody of the children,
okay,
uh, and you'd
okay.
be
So now I'm
financially responsible for that.
okay. So I'm not trying to say that you should agree with me. I'm more trying to provide you the Western liberal perspective of why what you're saying that sounds like the Matrix society where everything is fake and everyone's lying about what's happening to provide men with euphoria.
How is this euphoric? Like I told you, you ignored all of the responsibilities that men have, all of the duties that you have. Look, like imagine you're a ditch digger and
Yeah.
you have to go and every day from dawn till dusk dig ditches. Why? You have no other choice because you're married. You have to provide for your wife, maybe wives, maybe you have multiple wives, your children, and you can't opt out of that. Like you can't opt out of that manual labor for the rest of your life. This is like paradise according to your definition. Like Islam
Multiple
obligates
all
certain.
the cuties. I can marry all the cuties. Listen, let's go through your I want to go through
No,
your
no, you're
counter
interrupting
art.
me. Let me
There
give you a
Okay,
is
counter
okay.
a
argument.
way
Like you've
of
talked for a while
going
now, so let me
I have.
respond.
which
So the thing
direction
is that
we
these
are
are
going.
duties on both sides, husband and wife, and duties require toil. They require work. So you can't just give this kind of feminist portrayal of what Islam is just a oppression of women and men are living in a paradise of pleasure. That's just that's an orientalist depiction of what Islam is. Yes, you have certain rights and duties that are not the same for men and women because the genders are different, but there are an there's parity to a certain extent between the amount of toil and responsibility and duties that each gender has, and this is not.
There's nothing fundamentally less libertarian or orientalist about Daniel's characterization. The difference is he just puts a positive spin on it and reconstrues it in effectively the same terms that a sexual traditionalist would defend fundamentalist Christianity. Why does he have a favorite child dancer from Q? I don't fucking know. We are staring into the abyss, dear friends. There is no light in this tunnel.
Not just Islam's conception of marriage. It's not just Islam's conception of family. You find a lot of parallels within Christianity, within Judaism, especially when you look at pre-modern, pre-enlightenment religions. You find parallels in Hinduism and Buddhism. You find parallels in all of these pre-modern societies. It's only within the modern period where this kind, partly due to technology, where this kind of sexual liberation has proliferated. The kind of sexual liberation that you're advocating for would allow, for example, a husband, he knocks some woman up and he is able to just go and live his own life. He doesn't have a responsibility to provide for his children. He doesn't have a responsibility to provide for the person that he knocked up, because
He doesn't in a lot of traditional societies either. That's why in ancient Greece, for example, you remember that whole thing in 300 where they're holding the newborn babies up above a pile of bones, and if they find it undesirable for whatever reason, they discard it. The reason why exposure is so common is because the only person who is actually on the hook ultimately until the father decides to accept a newborn is the mother. You were allowed to discard unwanted children willy-nilly in even in Athens and Greece, etc. Why are we staring into the abyss again? It's a political theory channel. This is eminently relevant. It's just being debated by crazy people.
because there's no commitment, there's no marriage that is tying him to the reproductive act. This leads to a kind of dystopia. Why? Because then that single mother is having to raise that child on her own. She depends on the welfare state to provide, and children who are born and who are raised in these single parent households, they are more likely, far more likely to suffer from mental disorders. They're more likely to drop.
They still depend on like immediate communities to survive in a pre-sexual liberation context. Mr. Girl brings this up explicitly. Like if you break from mores in whatever way, you can be denied access to community resources, to shelter, family connections, and whatnot. Yet, as far as I can ascertain, the only thing totalitarian about sexual liberation, or the consequences of sexual liberation, is that men can now be held accountable for their offspring if they ditch after getting their partner pregnant, and single mothers are supported by the state when they do so. This is not... The definition of totalitarianism is not your community looks out for you. Right? That's not what that means.
Drop out of school, they're more likely to get into drugs, they're more likely to fall into crime, they're more likely to be on antidepressants, to be alcoholics, and on and on and on. All of these kinds of social problems are on the rise because of single motherhood. And this is not like you can read Freakonomics. That was a best-selling book that talks about all of these problems that come from single parenthood. So this is the kind of world. And then what does the rest of society have to do? The rest of society has to pay tax money to this massive bureaucratic surveillance police state to manage all of the increase in crime, mental dysfunction, unemployment that is caused because of sexual liberation. That's like, just go and look up videos of...
Oh, that's silly. The militarization of the police and hyper-surveillance is not the result of single mothers or sexual liberation. That's preposterous. I should have phrased that better. Wouldn't it be better to see a debate between less crazy people? Less crazy people don't debate this topic in this way.
Philadelphia, downtown Chicago, the slums of New York, and all of these major cities full of sexual liberation, by the way. But you have
I think what Mr. Girl was doing with the creepy cuties point was showing that a pedophile could live his best life under a Muslim fundamentalist system. Maybe the problem is his portrayal is terrible, and that wasn't clearly delineated. Like, he never says this. So, right now, he's still the guy who made the cuties video, saying he was attracted to one of the underage girls in that show.
have all of these social problems that are rotting away at modern civilization. And I don't know why you're not willing to acknowledge the link between sexual.
Oh, did he attribute unemployment to single mothers? All of his jokes are based on the premise that he is a pedophile. I mean, yeah, but like, here's the thing. There's joking about. There's carrying the joke that there's joking based upon the absurdity of him being a pedophile, and then there's joking about, isn't it funny that he is a pedophile? And there's no sharp distinction between the two. Like, he says stuff that's the equivalent, to go back to the analogy that Daniel introduced early in the debate. It's the equivalent between the person having sex with a chicken and then having sex with the chicken and declaring it to everyone he talks to. Right? It's worse Sunday, he exclaimed that the girls dancing in cuties were, and I quote, kinda hot. Oh, Christ. Alright, let's keep going.
Sexual liberation and all of these social ills. This is a massive blue pill.
I'm happy to acknowledge the link between those two. My problem is that the alternative is worse. And
wait. Hang on. Between what?
This is a massive blue pill. He's full of sexual liberation, by the way, but you have all of these social problems that are rotting away at modern civilization. And I don't know why you're not willing to acknowledge the link between sexual liberation and all of these social ills. This is a massive blue pill.
He hasn't established this. Why are you conceding that? You're conceding the whole debate. He hasn't provided any evidence or argumentation in defense of any of these linkages. Why are you just giving him that? What? Why?
I'm happy to acknowledge the link between those two. My problem is that the alternative is worse. And so again, like, it's not that I as a feminist like seeing single mothers and people being poor and whatever other problems you're talking about. It's that I don't think that forcing women into what I view as essentially sex slavery is I think that's worse.
Okay, that's fine, but what, you don't need to concede all of that to get to that. You can say, look, I think these linkages are dubious at best. Even if we concede for argument's sake that this is contributory, that's hardly a full explanation. That might be entirely ameliorated if a bunch of other interventions were made that have to be made nonetheless. And in addition to that, what you're proposing is effectively sex slavery. That's the response. If you really want to be modest about that, and I don't know why on earth you would. Why are you doing Daniel's work for him? But you're just conceding like 80% of the argument. Why? That's so stupid. Why?
So I agree.
That's a straw man. Islam does not. First of all, okay, Islam does not have this kind of
I
idea that
view
you're
it.
portraying as. But here's a
I
question
view
for
it
you.
as sex slavery.
Fine, put Islam aside. Put Islam aside. What is your
Okay.
solution to these problems? Is it
He doesn't have a
cutting or
solution to these
limiting
problems.
sexual liberty, or do you have some other solution?
Okay. I don't agree with your framing of them as problems. Is the thing. So
Oh
like
my God.
imagine a society that is even more restrictive and more fundamentalist than the one that you're than Sharia law. So let's say I start a religion where I'm like,
Those were objectively problems. They contribute to diminishing social cohesion and individual misery. The point is they're not directly linked to people having sexual freedom. That's not the cause.
you Muslims, you're the perverted weirdos. You are the sexually liberated ones. So I have a society where you have to wear like a special device that prevents you from thinking about sex unless you get permission, or like a device on your genitals that prevents them from getting aroused unless you get permission from like the elders and the tribe. And if you don't have this device, then the only reason you must be some kind of heathen or pervert. Basically, if you could lock down everything and force people to conform to religious law 100% without even being able to deviate in any way, I think at some point you would be like, well, some amount of freedom to be able to break the law, even if it's not good to break the law, even if you're going to be punished for it. We still need some sort of autonomy.
Yeah, I
So
completely agree. My whole argument is against
so it's
totalitarian
really
control.
yeah, so it's really about how much autonomy.
Like you have no,
And
I
so
completely value, I completely
right, so
value
but then for
autonomy.
me
Islam values autonomy,
No,
but
it
I
doesn't.
know, but
it
for
can't be
them
unrestricted. And that's why
Where's
I'm
that
asking
coming
you, what
from?
are the
Like,
restrictions on
like you
autonomy?
don't
And you're not answering
you
that
don't
question.
so like if women were
like,
chained
hang on.
up,
Like, maybe it's not categorically opposed to autonomy, but it's not pro-autonomy. Christianity is not pro-autonomy either. Like, there's nothing about that in the New Testament. Definitely not in the Old Testament. What the hell is he talking about? Where are you getting it? Like, who's he? Who would he refer to here? Like Urshad Manji? What's the argument?
at all times. Let's say I make a new religion and I say women have to have a chain around their necks at all times.
Darren, can you just ban whoever that is? Thank you very much.
This holds families together. This prevents adultery. This prevents straying. Eventually the woman will even forget what the outside of the house looks like, so she's not going to leave. And if she wants to leave, like blah blah. And no. If you make a special appeal, maybe we'll let you off your chain. But essentially, someone else is holding the key. I think you would agree that
Yeah, I would.
that would be going too far. Okay,
That doesn't cause a problem for
let
my
me
position,
just
though.
just let me get through this.
Go ahead.
I'm not trying to cause a problem for your position. Your position is valid. I just don't like it. I'm trying to explain why I don't like it. I understand that your position is internally consistent. I'm not trying to attack it or say that
It's not internally
even that you're
consistent.
wrong. I'm saying that it's a matter of preference, and I want to just explain why this.
It's not internally consistent. He's insisting upon the artificial reinforcement of something that he believes is already a natural tendency and a center of gravity for how human beings naturally are. These are contradictory positions. What is autonomy? Autonomy is like quite literally being a law unto oneself. So having full freedom to decide what one will and what one will prefer and how to dispose of one's own belongings and property. That's what autonomy is. Sexual liberation is autonomy in sexual activity, to whatever degree society permits it. Or rather, sexual liberation is a process of expanding sexual autonomy. I have no idea what definition of autonomy Daniel's using. I think he's just bullshitting as far as he can get so he can make his position seem palatable to most people.
This is my preference, and I want to explain how you sound to me from my perspective. So imagine some.
Before you finish, can I just
Yeah.
say immediately, with these thought experiments and examples that
Yeah.
you're giving, they're
Yeah.
not tied to human biology. The restrictions that I mentioned do have a connection to human biology that are
What?
universal. That's a fundamental difference why these examples you're giving are disanalogous. Like, people naturally want to
That's
move
fine.
around. You can't chain them
Well,
and expect that to be
humans
functional.
humans have been chaining each other up for a long time. Maybe there's not a biological imperative to put a chain around somebody else's neck, but maybe there is. I don't know. It happens across cultures.
Well, you characterize marriage as slavery. Like, you characterize
That's
marriage
fine.
as like putting a chain around someone's neck. That's
I wanna-
completely dissonant.
No, I'm pretty sure he characterized compulsory, being compelled to remain in a marriage as slavery, as a chain around your neck, and metaphorically, that's sort of what it is. It's compulsion. The reason why you put a chain around someone's neck is to compel them to stay in a certain place, right? That's kind of the point.
Analogous. Like, marriage,
I-
pair bonding is something that is organic, biologically rooted. That's something that women want to do. Women want to be taken
Well, but
care
it's
of,
also
to have a
something that.
husband
But you're
that
also
is
saying
committed to
it's
them.
Then where's the demand for contraceptives and all that other stuff coming from? If they don't want that, then sexual liberation wouldn't represent any noticeable distinction, because you would be freeing them to do something they have no tendency to do. Right? Is Daniel a biologist now? Apparently. He's a biologist, a sociologist, and a nuclear physicist.
them sexually. Like, that's these are
you're saying-
biological realities.
You're saying that's something women
adventurer,
want
an
to
explorer,
do on
a
a species
philosopher.
level, but on an individual level, they might have to be forced.
No,
Sometimes.
Islam
Or
doesn't
restricted-
force
restri-
Islam doesn't
it
force women to
restricted.
get married. Like, if you want to be
It restricts
sexually
them from-
active, if you want to be sexually active in Islam, it has to be within a marriage. Because
But
if
but
you
they're
don't
obligated.
do that, if you
they're
don't
obligated
do
by
that,
they're obligated by religious law to provide sex, and sex is the most biologically reinforced behavior there is. But sometimes you have to force someone if you want to have sex with them. If you want to guarantee you're going to have sex
you
with
have to
them whenever
force
you want.
people. You have to force people to pay child support. You have to force people to.
Absolutely.
If they
I'm not
don't,
saying-
if
I'm
a
not saying
mother
it's
doesn't
bad.
take care of her child, she
I'm-
has to be
I'm res-
forced to do that.
I'm
Like,
responding
what's
to your biological.
point?
I'm responding to your biologically motivated argument by saying that even Sharia law tells people that they have to do things that they're very biologically motivated to do, like have sex. That sometimes
Yeah, that's
people don't
why
want.
it's more
Okay,
rational. That's why it's more
That's-
rational. It's
okay.
What?
it's
Okay, so-
getting people to do things. It's incentivizing behaviors that are biological. Like, you as a person might not consciously realize
Mhm.
why a certain way of life is going to make you happier, and so you might not choose it. You might not prefer that way of
sure.
life.
I agree with that.
So your own personal happiness actually
Needs to be
you're
set
actually
aside.
not. Yeah, it needs to
Okay.
be set aside, and that's the whole point of revelation. Like, there's guidance
Yes,
from
but-
God, who has created us, who sets
that's a
us
bit of-
a kind
that's
of
a- oh my
model for
God.
life. It's not a restrictive, like, we're going to chain your neck to a heater in a
But that's a
basement
bit of
or
a
dungeon.
it's a bit of a
No.
stretch. to say-
Guidance. Guidance from God, as published by the www.islamhouse.com. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't expect God would rely on snail mail on the printing press to get his point across.
That a behavior that does not make the individual happy, but is for the betterment of society, to still call that biologically motivated.
I did not say that.
Okay.
Some people can be unhappy, but the majority of people will be happy. The majority of people in these kinds of marriages, as defined by Islam, will be happier than the kinds of marriages or casual relationships that exist in the sexually liberated West. I'll make that
But there's more
empirical claim.
But there's more to life than happiness and bliss.
No, I
and
know.
pleasure.
So even
So they will be happier, but they will be less free. And anytime
Yes.
you put me,
How's that a bad thing?
anytime you
Because they will be less free. That's why it's a bad thing.
put me at the, well, I'm telling you, this is my answer to the debate title is, anytime I have to choose between happiness and freedom, I'm going to choose freedom. To me,
So you acknowledge that it's going to make It's going to make you personally unhappy.
He's agreeing because he thinks he's a genius and he thinks he's... Oh, God. Here's the thing. Mr. Girl is not intrinsically stupid. He has some native intelligence, and with like a modicum of discipline and sense and taste, he'd be pretty effective. The problem is he categorically lacks these, and he thinks he is brilliant. He thinks every joke is a stroke of genius. He thinks he encompasses every argument he's taking part in, but it's an act. It's like Jordan Peterson taking his time to answer questions. It looks like he's thoughtful, but really all that's happening is you are witnessing someone who is not prepared at all, for whom everything is new, because on his off hours, he does zero work.
It potentially will make you unhappier. It potentially will destroy society. Like, we're all going to basically become these atomized individuals, drug addicts who are stuck,
I don't
in our
agree with that.
basements watching Netflix, whether it's like cuties or VR or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Or
the
both.
kind of society, or both. That's the kind of society that there's a lot of freedom in that society. But I think most people would find that horrifying.
I don't know. But I want to walk you through my analogy.
You don't? But no, answer. Do you think most people would find that horrifying?
If most people find it horrifying, then we probably won't do it.
No, but just like, do you think?
There is no guarantee of that, my friend.
I want to know how in touch you are with how people around the world act.
How much of that is malicious, though, Sunday? The intent doesn't have to be malicious for the practice itself to be malicious, right? If ultimately he's putting himself into situations where he is giving a bad presentation of the right position, or burying the right position in order to put himself in the limelight for the sake of his own vanity, I would say that's malicious. Like, I don't think he picks his targets based on like some deep-seated malice, but I think vicious is probably the better word for it, not malicious. I think it's vicious.
Actually feel about this topic.
Well, I think part of what you're horrified by is that people aren't horrified. So I don't.
No, they are. The majority of people are horrified. It's like a very small segment of Western educated people who have this harm principle as the end all be all of morality, because they've been indoctrinated basically to accept that as the only thing that matters. Everyone outside of
everybody's indoctrinated.
Okay, well, let's think about this for a second. Harm principle. Is this bad for society? Does this make people miserable? Or, alternatively, I have a book by someone I've never met that says, screw your happiness, do this stuff that will make you miserable, but you'll go to you'll go to Asgard afterwards. Like, what? I can't fathom why strangers would find the latter one less compelling than the former.
Indoctrinated.
No, it's a small percentage. Like, we can talk in numbers.
Everybody's indoctrinated with something.
No, the things that I'm describing are natural. Like, this is that's why they're universal. People are born like that.
You grew up in Texas, but you think that it's okay for society to execute gay people if they have sex. You're indoctrinated, just like I am. We're just.
It's not just Muslim. Look at the majority of cultures and religions. You'll find people agree with that position.
So what?
How is everyone indoctrinated except like a small minority?
No, I agree.
Well, hang on. How is everyone indoctrinated except for a small minority? Well, how do you account for the existence of you, Daniel? Like, if Mr. Girl's not putting up a strong front here. This is really... I'm not sure why I expected he would, but this is really frustrating.
I'm indoctrinated. I'm just saying.
I didn't expect he would. I just expected...
I can.
He had some good points early on that made me
kinds of
values that you want to...
No, you can't. You can't connect homosexuality to a natural instinct that people have. You can't connect like furries to...
Yeah, you can. There's homosexuality is common in the non-human animal kingdom. That's it's very common. It's I think as far as I'm concerned, it's almost ubiquitous to some degree among mammals. Okay. How do you tie a sexual impulse to biology or to some natural, like how is that a serious question? Let me see if I heard that correctly.
Minority.
No, I agree. I'm indoctrinated. I'm just saying you are too.
I can connect all of these kinds of
So
values that you want to. No, you can't. You can't connect homosexuality to a natural instinct that people have. You can't connect like
Yeah, natural instinct. What are you talking about? You can't connect sexual gratification to a natural impulse? Like what? To a natural instinct? That's like one of the few things you absolutely could in almost every case.
furries to a natural.
Furthermore, it wouldn't matter. Like you could that's why that's not a good argument in either direction, because we don't base what we consider to be like positive behaviors off of what animals or pre-human animals do. Like we base it off of other things. We have reason, or so the argument goes. Like whether or not something occurs in nature is not an argument for or against it for us, or for the ethics of it.
Natural instinct that people have.
Why not? People play, people imitate, people see animals, they imitate animals, they dress up as animals, they want to have sex, so they have sex. That's a pretty easy one.
So bestiality, like you're saying, bestiality is natural. Like being attracted and turned on by animals is something natural to human beings.
Being attracted to anthropomorphic animals is definitely specific to human beings. I don't know if any of this is natural, because it's always going to be culturally conditioned. Your tastes for myriad things are going to be at least partially conditioned by your cultural upbringing, by the things you encounter and experience in your life. But that doesn't matter. His decision to grow that beard was not natural. His decision to wear that hat was not natural. His decision to appear with somebody called Mr. Girl to debate this is not a natural instinct.
You're saying that, and you think that cave people never had sex with animals?
Yeah, no, you stop changing the question. Answer the question.
Okay.
Like, do you think it's natural?
Mr. Girl, the appropriate response to, do you think it is natural for human beings do you think it is natural for people to engage in homosexual relations with each other, when that is being equivocated with what furries do, when that is being equivocated with bestiality, when that is being equivocated with sexual liberation generally? The appropriate response to that is not to go, well, don't you think cavemen had sex with animals? Maybe that's true. That's not the road you want to go down here.
To be attracted to animals? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So there's no like mental dysfunction with being.
Mental dysfunctions can be naturally occurring. I don't agree that means it's unnatural to have mental dysfunction.
So
mental
bestiality. What about
nature.
necrophilia? Like, is that? So with the chicken example that I gave, you don't find any moral problem with it, obviously. But what about like?
I don't agree. I don't equate disgust to immorality, but I want to walk you through I want to explain this, and I'm not saying this to tell you that you're wrong. I'm saying this to tell you how you sound to me. I want you to picture that I start a new religion, and in my new religion, women have to have a chain around their neck at all times and have to remain in the home.
Yes, I'm with you so far. Very good.
You have to concede that this would remove all instances of adultery, It would force marriages to stay together as long as the man is satisfied. It would solve any remaining problems that fundamentalist societies have.
So-
Oh, and you mentioned Judaism
yes,
and
you strike a
Christianity.
hard bargain,
I
Mr.
have
Girl.
nothing against Islam specifically. I lived in or worked in Beverly Hills for many years, and I was friends with a lot of Persian Jews there, and I was absolutely horrified by their society. Even in LA, I was constantly trying to sexually liberate them. I did my best.
They're pretty sexually liberated, right? I didn't understand what you mean by that.
Um,
But anyway,
No-
continue with your example.
Not really.
Sorry.
Not really. Yeah. Okay. Not to my liking. So in this super fundamentalist society, where we don't just tell people you have to follow the rules, we make them follow the rules by whatever means are necessary. You can imagine your response to that being like, well, yeah, you're following the rules. There's no such thing as divorce anymore at all. Families are kept together. Everything is on paper perfect, but there's a level of oversight and force being used that I'm not comfortable with.
I'm not comfortable with it either.
Right. No, I'm saying that would be your reaction to that, to a super a society that basically enslaves its women literally and tells them you have to follow the rules. There's a point at which you and Muslims across the world and fundamentalist religious people across the world would be like, well, now you've gone too far. Yes, the rules are being followed, but it's too much. The people need a certain level of autonomy, and it's the same reason we don't put a limiter on your car to make it so you can't go over the speed limit. There's just a certain amount of freedom, even if we're going to punish people for exercising.
The reason why Mr. Girl is in this debate and not someone like me, for example, or, somebody way more appropriate, like Merrick, for example, would have murdered this guy. The reason why Mr. Girl is in this debate is because, for whatever reason, Vosh and Destiny just really like the company of weirdos they can make fun of, and that gets them a boosted profile. And so they get invited to these things because James is a vulture.
Exercising it that we want to give people. So to me, while I agree that it would be nice if everybody were married in family units, I don't care if they're heterosexual marriages, but it would be nice if there were family units, that children always had parents, there was always food on the table, the father always cared about the children and felt that his life's duty is to toil for those children and provide food and shelter. And if women always wanted to have sex and were available for sex, I mean, yeah, all of that sounds great, but to the feminist, the metaphorical chain around the neck that provides that is unacceptable, and the expectations of men do not even it out.
Okay.
So do you think that
This would almost be like a good argument if he didn't concede everything leading up to it, but he's already conceded that every social ill basically is the result of sexual liberation. So Daniels can just fall back on that endlessly. Like, you gave too much ground. You gave the entire game away, and then you said, I don't like how this feels. But you could have contested literally everything Daniel said, because everything was baseless, and in fact contradictory. But you gave him the whole thing. Like, who cares how you feel? Daniel's argument was incoherent, and he made factually untrue statements, or vacuous or unsubstantiated statements about the relationship between the topic under debate and a host of social ills with myriad complex historical and otherwise discrete causes. And you just let him have all of it. Like, you didn't just let him have all of it. It's like, you didn't even say, I don't know about that. Let's leave that aside. Let's direct our attention to this other thing, though, that I think is important. You agreed. You agreed on the linkage between them. He didn't establish Jack, you just gave him everything. So your answer is to is sexual liberation good? Daniel says no, categorically, and you say also no, basically categorically, except for how I feel about it. The live debate format was a mistake. No, I think somebody who'd done a modicum of preparation could have easily wiped the floor with Daniel. I think some people without doing a modicum of preparation, like for example, again, I'm going to mention Merrick again, would have done extraordinarily well in this debate in particular. Trying to think of who else. I think Destiny debated him. He probably actually would have done pretty well. I'm trying to think of who else would actually take part in this debate and would do well, because those are the two conditions, right? I can think of a few people who would do well. I can't think of many people who would actually debate Daniel live like this.
Husbands being required to provide child support is slavery.
What?
Because sometimes it's 20 years of child support. How is that not slavery?
Well, what's the difference? Like, are under Islam or under Sharia, are men not required to provide for their children until they're adults, regardless? That's not slavery. That's you're not putting the burden of raising a child onto society and specifically onto the mother alone, while you run off and do whatever you want. Destiny did really well in his debate with this guy. I'm not surprised. It's actually astonishing that Mr. Girl is doing so badly, not that anyone else would do very well. Like, Daniel's argumentation is horrendous.
I think that when you have unprotected sex or try to have protected sex and fail, you have an obligation to the person that is born out of that.
So that is a restriction, right? That is a restriction of freedom.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, but you just said
that's not a restriction on freedom, though. It's an obligation. These are distinct. The issue is not that sex comes with obligations. Like, all sorts of activities come with obligations. Driving a car comes with obligations. Like all sorts of things. The issue is Daniel's not talking about, well, we should have like stringent rules obliging parents to keep their children in a specific kind of environment for their own good. We do have that to a certain extent. They're just not very thorough, and they're not. There's problems with it. The issue with what Daniel's arguing is that he's saying specifically women need to be constrained from sexual choice to a strong degree, and men as well to a strong degree. He's not just talking about promiscuity or talking about like sexual freedom after you have children. He's talking about people being quite literally locked into marriages via very material force, because choking somebody off from the resources you require to survive at a minimally human level is very much a strong arm approach. In addition to that, he's lumping in things like homosexuality, etc. So even outside of a marriage context, he wants these things constricted for vacuous reasons that he has not given. And there are arguments that can be given for like cultural shock or whatnot, or any number of things that I don't think hold water, but nonetheless like could have their own internal logic. He hasn't provided that. He hasn't even provided bad logic justifying his position. He's just stated there is an intrinsic link between this and all of these other things, and Mr. Girl's just conceded to all of it.
that you just said that if there's a situation where freedom is limited, you consider that essentially slavery, because kinds of
No, no, no,
restrictions
no.
I'm talking about
No,
within
I believe in
Islam or
laws.
traditional. So Islam and traditional religion, they have laws. And these are the things that
Absolutely.
restrict personal freedom. But you're
I'm not.
characterizing those as slavery.
Yeah,
But
because
these other things, like some formula that you gave, you consent to
okay,
consensual sex. Therefore, like, where is
okay.
that coming from? Why
I mean,
would
you
we
can
agree to
imagine,
that?
you can imagine a spectrum from there are no laws at all, and everybody can literally do whatever they want at all times with no repercussions, no government, total anarchy, to slavery.
Yeah, we're both
The
in
other the
between that. We're both in
yes,
between.
absolutely, I agree. I don't think it is literally slavery. I'm saying from where I want to be on the freedom oversight spectrum, what you're describing sounds like slavery for women and a paradise for men.
But I just explained how that's not the case. Like, you have all these
Well,
obligations that men have. Remember the ditch digging, the poor guy who has to
yeah,
dig ditches. Like,
but
that's the reality.
what's
Actually, for most of men in society, that was the reality. They couldn't like sit in a nice, cushy, conditioned apartment and stream Twitch or Twitch on
yeah.
stream
This is the argument of somebody who thinks that women do absolutely no work when they're at home watching children.
on Twitch, or like
Yeah,
me, have a YouTube channel and just live a cozy life. You have to actually go and
yeah.
toil. Sometimes you're conscripted into the army, and you'll literally have to die
I
for
think
your family and for your
well, I think
society. Like this, what is this like
we have the
amazing?
draft.
What is this
You
amazing utopia
registered
for men that you're describing? Like, I don't understand. And
well,
then
you
also,
registered for the draft in the United States, so you can also be conscripted. And also,
what do you
as you
mean?
pointed out
What's your
yourself,
point with that?
that you're making claims about one culture that are the same in both cultures. You have to dig ditches there. You know, if you're a ditch digger here, you have a kid and you get surveilled by the government and they decide that you have to pay child support, you got to dig ditches here too.
Yeah. So that, how can you agree with those kinds of restrictions on men, like being required to pay child support, being required
Mhm.
to provide, basically at threat of being thrown in prison if you
Okay,
miss the child support? You agree with
so
that
I can
as that's not slavery, but then you have a problem like
yes,
with Islamic marriage requirements. And why are you
yeah.
focusing
So
on like that one thing? Like,
because each of us has a line past which we say, you know what, that sounds like slavery to me.
yeah,
Okay,
but
and
I've
your line,
explained why. Like, the difference between me and
I can
you,
explain,
Oh,
the
thank
difference
God. It looks
between
like it's
me and
almost
you is
over.
that I've pointed to
We're going into
how
questions
the
soon.
kind of
We're
line
not going to
which
go through the whole
you've
thing.
drawn leads to all kinds of societal dysfunction
well, that's a
and
reverse
disaster,
engineer,
but
but
and
Wait. Is he
totalitarianism.
going to
That's
walk
what
that back
your
now?
line
but that's
leads to. That's the
backwards.
problem.
That's a backwards way of constructing your definition of slavery. My
Oh,
definition of slavery is based on how are people being treated,
he's
not
still
what
conceding
happens if we
everything.
don't treat them that way. So from that perspective, both of us have a line that we won't cross, that you will acknowledge that there is a certain amount of authoritarianism and lack of autonomy that you're not comfortable with, even if it makes people follow the law. For me, that line is um, you can't have the government telling women that they have to have sex.
I,
You
what
can't
government
have the
says that? That's not in Islam. You're
you
straw
have to have
manning
sex with
Islam.
you have to have sex with your husband.
You don't have to get married. If you get married, if you
Yes, if you get
choose, if
okay,
you willingly choose to get
you're
married, then there are obligations that come with that.
Jesus Christ. Oh, okay, and how are those enforced? Because you're not saying wouldn't it be nice? You're against sexual liberation. You're not talking about we should acculturate people to have a preference to monogamy and to having like a certain uh what's the term for it? You know, like he's not talking about enculturating people to certain kinds of behaviors. That'd be a more interesting argument. Like he's not talking about like developing an ethos. He's talking about liberation specifically. The reason why we have a concept of morality is because you are sometimes free to do things that are not widely considered to be right or justified. These are different zones. He's talking about constricting liberty. He's not talking about constricting the realm of what we consider to be morally acceptable. but we permit lots of things that are considered widely to be morally unacceptable. Like, for example, there are unethical ways to divorce a person. Like, you can wait, for example, to when your partner is specifically in a disadvantageous position so that they suffer the most, and yet you would still legally have the right, and the liberty, therefore, to divorce them at that time. Whereas waiting specifically for that time with the intent to maximize the harm done to your partner, psychological or material, would be grossly immoral. Like, this is really elementary. Like, he's talking about forcing women specifically to have sex because that's it. Which, yes, under that understanding, practically all sex within a marriage would be coerced at some level. It would, at the very least, conceptually be in the ballpark of rape.
But
Okay,
there's no
just
obligation in
listen.
Islam to
You,
get married.
I don't think we should be trying to convince each other to agree with each other's views. There's absolutely no way that you are going to come out of this conversation being any more like me, and I'm not going to come out of it being any more like
I'm not
you.
trying to convince you. I'm not trying
Well,
to
then
convince
stop
you.
Trying to decide which one's worse. Oh.
Stop arguing with me.
No,
and
I'm trying to respond to the things that you're actually saying.
I want you to understand that the distinction you're making between society, a government forcing women to have sex, or forcing women to have sex with their husband, or forcing them to have sex with their husbands, which to you think
you're fine with
which
forcing husbands to provide child support.
Will you listen to me for a second?
Sure.
You're making a huge distinction between these two, as though they're
Well, if the husband doesn't provide child support, then who's supporting the child? Practically, the woman is now forced to provide child support, right? Like, it's the reason why the man has to provide child support is because the resources have to come from somewhere. Child support doesn't account for all of the expenses of raising a child. They account for a good part of them, as you should be absolutely obligated to provide if you are responsible for generating a child in the first place and are not already voluntarily in a situation where you're giving your resources to the common raising of that child to begin with. This is such a stupid line of argumentation.
going to strike me as very different. They're exactly the same. I have no emotional response. There's nothing different to me as being forced to have sex with your neighbor and being forced to have sex with your husband, because as you
Like, here would be an argument. In the event that the husband is raising the child, or the father rather is raising the child, does the father have a right to claim child support from the mother? I'm actually not sure if that's the law in the United States. I have a suspicion it's not. That would be a fair critique. That would definitely be a lack of parity. Can the mother be forced to pay child support? So BC law at least specifies parent, not mother or father. So it's let's see. Nussbaum law: do women pay child support? The idea that women do not have to pay child support is a myth. While historically a father would make child support payments for the children, this is no longer the standard. Child support is based on two factors: the primary residence of the children and income. The parent that does not have the primary residence of the children must pay child support in an amount in accordance with their income. So that's for Canada. Is that the same thing in the States? Although mothers can pay child support, this is from, oh, let's see, is there a better, here we go, we'll just look at the Wikipedia page. In the United States, child support is the ongoing obligation for a periodic payment made directly or indirectly by an obligor, or paying parent or payer to an obligor, for the financial care and support of children of a relationship or a possibly terminated marriage. The laws governing this kind of obligation, okay, I want to see. Typically, the obligor is the non-custodial parent. In the US, there is no gender requirement for child support. For example, a father may pay a mother or a mother may pay a father. Yeah, so this goes both ways. It's based upon who has custody of the child, because by definition, if you have custody of the child, your resources are already going towards housing and feeding that child. Mr. Girl doesn't want a debate, he wants to have a conversation. Well, fuck what he wants. He signed up for a debate.
You pointed out, I am a liberal feminist. That's just
So
how
it's
I.
a-
That's just how
And
I
he should
think.
have bloody prepared.
So
But no,
the
but
government,
let's-
the
let me
government,
stick
the
to that.
government can force you to pay for kids that you've had. To me, yes, it's not slavery. The government can force you to have sex with your spouse. To me, is slavery. That's just where I draw the line, and
But
I'm
it
not going to
doesn't
be
make
able.
sense.
So there's not even an argument here, because child support can be levied against both men and women. It just depends on who has custody of the child, and like what their relative incomes are. Kinks of Seplo says, I know several mothers that pay child support in the US. Yeah. So that's Daniel has no case whatsoever. I learned something today. Yay.
It may not
doesn't,
make
like,
sense. It may
how
not
is it
make.
like the psychological toll could be much worse. Like
It could be.
it's like you're
Absolutely.
appealing
And
to
the
some
psychological.
you're appealing to something metaphysical without any kind of justification, rational, empirical, or otherwise. Like why is there a distinction here? Is it because of some kind of harm, like the woman is more greatly
No.
harmed? Okay, it's not in
No.
terms of harm. So then what
It's
is the
this-
distinction between the husband being required to provide child support and
Mm-hmm.
all of those financial duties that he is that he has to do?
I understand the question.
versus
The husbands are not uniquely required to provide child support. That was the case. That is no longer the case. So Daniel's argument here is stale by, I think, a few decades.
yeah, okay, then
I
what's the
get it.
difference? What's the difference?
The difference is the same difference between the same way that
Yes, this Daniel guy is indeed seriously equating marital rape to mandatory child support.
necrophilia just horrifies you, even if there were not a specific rule against
Oh my
it
god, man. Okay,
in the Quran.
here, I'm not even paying attention to this. So here's, because it doesn't matter. Here's the problem. So you have a guy called Mr. Girl, whose contention against Daniel's argument for traditional marriage ethics. This is according to like your average right-wing audience member. You have a guy called Mr. Girl, saying he's going around trying to quote-unquote sexually liberate people, and is arguing for and appears to be arguing for, in cases, the naturalness of bestiality and necrophilia. Leaving like the nuances of the debate aside, you lose by default, because all they read is, oh, creepy guy with no morals on the right, of course he's against traditional marriage rules. Like, you don't do this in this kind of debate. There's no it does absolutely nothing but reinforce one side and disappoint another one, because everybody knows it makes the yes side look weak. And not just weak, but debauched. And there were serious arguments in favor of the yes side. And he conceded every point that Daniel made. But all of our social ills are the result of sexual liberation. Yes, I concede all of that. Why would you concede all of that? That's like that. If he can sustain that, if he can actually argue that sexual liberation is bad for society at all these different levels, that's a very compelling argument for a lot of people. You do not just concede that. That's where the argument should have been. Okay, show me your logic. Actually demonstrate a necessary condition between all of these different social ills, from crime, etc., to sexual liberation in particular. Show me that this is the necessary consequence of that. Show me that in this case, it is the specifically relevant cause of that, if indeed it is a cause of that at all, and like then you would have like an argument. But he just gives it away, because all he's got is, well, that's just like your opinion, man. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's just his opinion, even if he concedes it. If everybody who already agrees with him is reinforced, that's a better opinion to have than yours. If he wanted to have a conversation, he could have had a conversation offline. Instead, he staked a very important argument, an argument that is far from being universally won. On his ability to kind of wing it and sort of look like a engineering student undergraduate's notion of what an intelligent person looks like. This is Beauty and the Beast is a culturation, a story designed for young brides to accept much older and attractive men as husbands because they are not what they seem. I don't know how far I want to go with that. I thought the whole point behind Beauty and the Beast was that, because remember, like, Beast is punished because Beast is originally like handsome and whatnot, and he becomes like handsome at the end. After he undergoes a transformation where he learns not to judge people strictly by, or to value people strictly by their external appearances. And they actually kind of cheat in a way because they don't make Beast unattractive. They make him like sort of like rugged and almost like demigod-like. Like he almost becomes a fetish object. Like the story is kind of weak that way. Beauty and the Beast is about seeing past the fursuit. The problem is that I'm pretty sure, like, when you look at like how fursuits look, they're often not like anatomically correct. They look like, or at least I don't seek these out, but from what I have seen, they generally resemble Disney characters. So I think the effect has been the opposite of intended, if that's what it was about. Like, look, is Captain Amelia from Treasure Planet intrinsically unattractive? Disturbingly, no. That's like Beast is basically that kind of rendition. They don't emphasize his bestial qualities. They depict like this sort of majestic Dracula character as if he had in addition bestial qualities. Moving on.
You would still not be in favor of people practicing necrophilia. Well, that's not true because there is a victim when you're being raped by your husband.
Yep. Okay, that's good. Why are you grinning about
if you're being forced to pay
Yes.
child support? You're being raped because
Fuck this guy. Okay, I think we got it. We got what we came for. That's ugh. Oh man. What did we just watch? I mean, at the very least, Daniel is such an abominable idiot that he's gonna basically cede the debate at the end anyways. By saying that, well, yeah, like, sure, under my system, women are going to be raped by their husbands. Like, he basically concedes that in the sentence. But in your system, men have to pay child support. It's like, sure, sexual liberation makes you free and happy, but have you considered slavery? Skip to the end. Nah. I think I just want to finish. I think we got it at this point. Besides, I want to go for a walk so I can do office hours later. Because we will be doing that. I can't record because of pollen. I realize I've been speaking endlessly, but it's different when I'm recording because I like I try to enunciate carefully. And I can't like breathe. Like the gain filter sort of cuts out some of my gasping because of the pollen in the air. When I'm recording, I can't really do that. So no, we're not doing EU4 now. This was stupid. I don't know why Mr. Girl agreed to do this. If he wasn't going to prepare, if he was going to concede basically every social argument Daniel is going to field. He has the very good argument, very good counter argument, very good counter argument. That coerced sex, even in a marriage context, is rape, very much so. And in fact, cheapens the relationship categorically by making it the result of coercion, by making its longevity the result of coercion. And Daniel just concedes this, but beyond that, Mr. Girl ceded basically everything else. And as Daniel demonstrates, there are people for whom that's a fair trade-off. Horrifically. So, before we go Discord link, Darren, if you could do me a favor and just post a Discord link in the chat, I'd be very appreciative. Well, that was hell. See you in a couple of hours. Oh, and if you like what I do. Oh, did I miss the best part about incels? Was there something coming up? He gets asked about the cuties joke in the... Oh. Where... Do you have a timestamp? Ron, do you have a timestamp for this? There wasn't the chicken stickers here. Thank you, Josh. Do you have a timestamp for the cuties joke? The issue is that Mr. Girl has no issue with rape? Really? What? Okay, get me a timestamp, someone. There's like an hour of questions here. I'm not going to filter through them all. Where is this? Is Mr. Girl a kitty chase? Like, do we have a consensus on that? We don't, but he does yikesy stuff, so it's like... That's the thing, we don't. Right? Like, there are some things where you want a solid consensus of no on. I don't think there is a consensus on that. Unless he clarifies. Like, if he says, like, hey, this is all just an edgy joke, and no, I find this horrific, that would help. I haven't seen that yet. If you ever want to really suffer, just watch his video Consent is Complicated, which is so vile it has been banned from YouTube and Vimeo. Well, if it's been banned from YouTube and Vimeo, I can't watch it, right? Because then I'll have effectively published the video. I guess I could watch it off screen.
Out. So this is Daniel, is gay sex worse than sex with a 9-year-old?
Oh, wow, that was lucky. Did I just click on that? Did I just find it by accident? Okay, I guess... Is gay sex worse than sex with a 9-year-old is the question. Good God.
Yeah, so we can talk about child marriage. We can talk about homosexuality. This is like combining both of these issues. So definitely, this is a longer discussion that you can find video.
No, it's not a longer discussion. The answer is categorically, regardless of your position on the ethicality of non-heterosex, it's always better than pedophilia or than child abuse. Like this is easy, guys.
On my channel related to them. We can go to the child.
The short answer is yes.
No, yeah, it's obviously yes, but
Wait, hang on. Give me a sec. What are they saying yes to?
them. So we can talk about
with, let's see. This one, I'll let this. Is this related to the topic?
It is, absolutely.
Fair enough. I was like, all right, I kicked the other one out. So this is, they said, Daniel, is gay sex worse than sex with a 9-year-old?
What?
Yeah, so we can talk about.
Why are you saying yes to that?
Marriage. We can talk about homosexuality. This is like combining both of these.
No,
issues.
It's not.
So
he's asking you if you think homosexuality is worse than pedophilia.
This is a longer discussion that you can find videos on my channel related to them. We can go to the child.
The short answer is yes.
No, yeah, it's obviously yes, but I need to be able to explain.
You want to give context, of course.
Yeah, so in low technology societies historically, 99% of human history, basically, child labor was essential. Children would work in fields to produce food to survive. People needed child labor to survive, and there was no schooling, and it was over 90% illiteracy. It was only a very small elite that was educated or schooled in any sense. There was no such thing as career for the overwhelming majority. Rather, but for the modern age, a career is not low-skilled food production and agriculture or hunting and gathering, but rather extended schooling.
I'm going to assume they misunderstood the question and they reversed it. I'm going to assume that, but I don't know how they both missed it. I thought Mr. Girl was being ironic and was like, the answer is obviously yes for Daniel, and then Daniel conceded like it was just the most obvious thing. I thought Mr. Girl was saying the answer for Daniel was yes. I want to see if he contests it.
To be like a professional or a doctor, lawyer, etc. So boys and girls were marrying early. There's no need for schooling, and it wasn't ruining their schooling because.
Oh fuck! No, he's saying yes. He's saying yes. He didn't switch it, guys. He did not switch it. He did not switch it at all. He is arguing that homosexuality is worse than pedophilia. That is what he is arguing. Oh. This is next level.
There was no schooling to get married early. Like the idea of a career was nonsensical. Like there was no such thing for most of human history. So these were illiterate societies, and usually the offense that people have regarding girls marrying or even boys marrying at age 9, 10, 11, 12 is because they're ruining their.
He's saying Daniel's answer is yes, obviously. And I thought that was a joke. Because, see, what I expected Daniel to do was to go, no, they're both really, really bad. And I'm going to say that pedophilia is worse, but now here's my argument against homosexuality as well. But no, he's taking a hard line on this. He's not just saying homosexuality is worse. He's saying pedophilia is actually okay.
Schooling, or they're being robbed of the opportunity for career, etc. But these haven't existed for the majority of human history. Rather, bearing children, being a part of.
Why did I skip over the best part at 1 hour and 9 minutes and 45 seconds? I didn't skip over it. I didn't know it existed. There's like 40 minutes before this. We'll go back in a minute. I just want to see I want to see this nightmare play out.
A family, being a loving mother, that was really what was essential. So there was no real reason to delay a female from getting married. And that's why we see this kind of marriage in literally every pre-modern society. It was not seen as a sexual dysfunction or a perversion. And girls can reach puberty by 9 years old. It's called precocious puberty. There's a lot of biological data on this. So there's nothing really that is morally wrong with this.
He's not swallowing the bullet.
even
Gulping them
today
by the
in many
bagful.
different societies. It's not a source of psychological dysfunction or physical dysfunction. And I think a lot of the Western psychological literature also supports this kind of practice. I'm sure, Mr. Girl, you've talked to different pedophiles, for example, and you've interviewed them, but you're familiar with the idea of hebephilia. So hebephilia,
I've heard the term, yeah.
Yeah, so that's not considered a psychological dysfunction because
It's okay, guys. Technically, he's only a hebephile.
such a large proportion of even Western men that are interviewed or that are given these surveys and they're kind of hooked up to different sensory devices show that a large proportion of them are sexually attracted or can be aroused by images of girls in their early teens or even as young as like 10 years old. So within the literature, like you can go read the research paper by Bruce Rind. He says that there is no.
They can be aroused by people much younger. That's why pedophiles exist. What is the argument here?
This is actually an adaptive, evolutionarily adaptive thing to be attracted to females at this age because it maximizes the fertility window. Women don't have infinite fertility. They are only fertile for a few decades. And in order to maximize that
I mean, this is illustrative, though. Like, the the traditionalist argument actually does boil down to being pro-rape and pro-pedophilia. I mean, Daniel's doing Mr. Girl's work for him, I guess.
That required early marriage.
Assuming it's Mr. Girl's work, we've yet to see his response.
According to Bruce Rind, because it's evolutionarily adaptive, so it cannot be a psychological dysfunction. It is just a modern social taboo.
I feel like I should say something.
Yes, you should.
I agree with the evidence that you are talking about. I don't agree with your conclusion. So I agree that adults can be attracted to pubescent, prepubescent, whatever, children or around that age, and in the right circumstances, more can be aroused than we would like to admit. It is a taboo. However, I don't believe that just because it is occurring biologically or naturally or whatever, that means it is moral. I think that the age of consent should be 17.
Okay, but that incurs responsibility on you then. Like, this is a basic point. Even if Mr. Girl is correct, and I would probably be a lot more skeptical, or a lot more like constrained in terms of how I interpret that data. Even if Mr. Girl is correct, what you absolutely should never do in that case, if you agree that normalizing that kind of thing is still immoral, is normalize it by reinforcing the idea that it's okay, a lot of other people are like this too, you're not uniquely horrible. Why? Because that stands as a justification in most people's heads for indulging if they do suffer from that proclivity, for whatever reason. So you can't just do this. Like, that has an effect.
I think that murder could be a biologically selected for trait. That doesn't mean that we're not going to define it as a mental illness. So I agree that these feelings, latent or active, are more common than we would like to admit, and that is a taboo to even talk about it. But I think that the thoughts and feelings need to be separated from the action. So I guess this is one area where I am less sexually liberated than you. I think that just because people want it doesn't make it right, and I think it is.
Okay, that little bit there, was good. If he didn't do everything else in this debate so far, let's look at 109. Ugh. In the hands of somebody saying this, that would have actually been a pretty strong retort. But he's conceding everything in the most irresponsible, self-destructive way possible. It's just... Jesus Christ. Oh god, Mr. Girl President Sunday interview when. Oh, that would be so fucking awkward. Oh my god. You know what though? I would just beat him at his own game. Without coming off as a pedophile. I just do the awkward silence thing. I can do that really well. $109.45, the conversation. Okay, let's take a look at this.
Does the same thing, because you have certain percentage of the most attractive men who will monopolize sex with most women, people in the 1%, such as Max himself. So,
well, yeah, I don't want to say anything.
Right. So, but you would, I think that people who have this opposition to free
Ron, this better be good.
capitalism and prefer some kind of, whether we want to call it socialism or redistribution of wealth in order to increase equality, they should have to be
a
consistent.
Redistribution of women.
Not a redistribution in sense of like, yeah, here's, prostitutes for everyone. That could be like a solution that the West might take up. But you could also impose like certain kinds of rules, like you have to be married, you have a limitation on the number of sexual partners because there's sexual exclusivity in marriage, things like that.
This guy is just an incel who found Allah. Allah doesn't want any part of this kid.
Is a type of redistribution of sex in society. So
it's a redistribution of women as a commodity, but in a sexually liberated society, men are also a commodity.
What?
Sex is provided by both sexes.
Yeah, that doesn't make it a commodity though. It's not what a commodity is.
Isn't that a more just system, as opposed to the sexual liberation that you've been advocating?
What? What the hell are you talking about?
No, because I still think it's all rape. But again, that's just my definition. I'm not saying you're like objectively wrong. It's just
you are saying that.
Why aren't you?
No, it's just I just see things differently from you.
Oh my god.
I'm not saying that your positions are not internally consistent. I believe that they are.
They're not internally. What? Yeah.
I just don't like it.
I take it back. He's an idiot.
I just don't want it.
He's an idiot.
Okay, I can live with that as long as I'm being consistent and rational. But I mean, I can't return the statement though. I don't think you're being consistent. I think that you didn't really distinguish how forced labor for men is somehow, which is essentially slavery. How is somehow.
Well, would you rather be forced to dig a ditch or to have sex with somebody you don't want to have sex with?
No, if I marry someone.
Okay, Ron, this doesn't have what you said it has. They're not talking about the thing. This is just more of the same. Alright, I've had enough of this. If anybody, if you like what I do, and you want to support the channel, please like and comment. It actually does help. I hate saying that, but it's just it is how it be. I do have a Patreon if you want to support a little bit more. I'm finishing off a video essay right now, critiquing the open society and its enemies. I go all out with those. If you're a top tier subscriber, so just hint that's there, as well as there's like weird merchandise and whatnot, mugs and things like that. If you want to support the channel. If not, no worries. You are not a second class viewer just because you don't support the channel in that way, and even just being here and saying hi helps quite a bit. So thanks everybody for... Oh, it continues? Just give it a sec. Well, why'd you start it like 3 minutes before then? Oh my god, okay. I'll give you 2 minutes, alright? This better get good.
I recognize that just like any kind of contract. Like I make a contract with you to mow your lawn every week.
Give it 5 more. I'm not giving it. Why are you? Give it 5 more minutes. Why are you giving me a timestamp that's 7 minutes before the point you want me to look at?
Okay. We can jump into the Q&A. Do want to say, folks, our guests are linked in the description. We highly encourage
Is it in the Q&A?
You can hear plenty more where that came from, as we really do appreciate our guests. And that includes at the podcast. We put our guest links in the description box.
Okay, around 1:52:40 is the cuties joke. That's like way near the end here. Yeah, Ron just wants to suffer. Yeah, I'm done. I get it. I don't need any more because he's... Mr. Girl threw this one, and in the most suspect way possible. I'm this was just repellent on multiple levels. Don't, if you ever find yourself in a room with this individual, and I'm not even going to bother to specify who I'm talking about, find a way out. That's all. Again, like and subscribe if you like the channel and you like what I do. It does help a lot, and take care, everyone. I'll be back on tonight for office hours. Ciao.